Mr. Biddle, skeptic paraceleb, enjoys Fight Club at paranormal conferences, got himself banned from the museum. No wonder he got vickered from a certain podcast. Mr. Vickers, the origin of getting vickered. He didn't do what his veteran podcast host told him. He questioned psychics. Then he made the critical error of being friends with a certain paraceleb skeptic. It's no wonder he was vickered from a podcast. Ugh, this guy. Countless journal articles, statistics. He will bore you to death. Vickered from a podcast, just like the two other members of Three Tortured Souls. He also made the critical error of wanting open discussions with questioning. The final nail in the coffin was appearing on a podcast with two other vickered podcasters.
That was great.
How you guys doing?
I love the origin story. Dave, like you are like a master at making.
Oh man.
Yes. So, welcome to another episode of Three Tortured Souls, and tonight is scary Halloween campfire stories. So each one of us picked a story that we're going to tell, or in some instances, like myself, read, so I don't screw it up. Of course, I haven't been pre-gaming as much as some people, so I'm hoping I can make it through. Oh, never mind. It's already fucked up. So, yes. It was fun. I picked a story that's local to Chicago, but it's heard all over the place. So I'll talk about the origins of it and some of the uniqueness of the story around here, and kind of see what we come up with. So let's see. Let's toss it over to Tim.
There was a lot of them to choose from, and I enjoyed looking through them. I think Kenny came up with a fantastic story that I've never heard before. So much so, I want to use it on tourists when they're around us. Hey, Donna, there's a ghost that walked by you. But I had a good time. Like the origin of mine was really interesting, but when looking up some like where it came from and the ideas around it, had a really kind of cool social context to it, and kind of like a I don't know. I won't get too much into it because we're a little bit different podcast than that. But I thought it was really interesting, and I'll definitely touch on it when we get there.
All right, Kenny, cool. What do you got?
I'm going to talk. Hopefully, it doesn't freeze up because I'm getting spotty internet. But I am not at home, as you can see. I am in a different place. I'm actually up in Buffalo, New York, once again. I was here last week doing work for Joe Nickel, and I came up here. Unfortunately, this time it was for a memorial service for a colleague that had passed away a few weeks ago. So we came up here. It was a very nice service. And I literally just walked across the parking lot from the bar where we were all drinking. So I'm already slurring. I apologize. I'm not going to try any kind of names or words that I don't know what they mean or how they were pronounced. But we're doing opening statements, right? Yep. For our topics tonight. So yep. Campfire ghost stories, always love them. I didn't really get into camping until I met my wife. Honestly, I never went camping. The most I went camping was literally in the basement of my house where I set up a tent because my parents just didn't do camping. So, but when I did go out camping, it was great to hang out by the fire. just like the one Tim has up in his background, which is awesome. Show off. But I mean, it's these are really great. And researching just a little bit of the history, just finding out that, talking about ghost stories around a fire began with the Christmas holiday. It was a Christmas tradition, to gather around the hearth, and that was the main heating source or the cooking source of the family, and that's where everyone gathered. And it was really neat getting into the history of it, because it was like everyone gathered around the fire, but in modern times, that translated to everyone gathering in the kitchen. And every time we've had a party, everyone has gathered in the kitchen. That's just where everyone ends up. So it was really cool getting into that, and finding a story, because the idea was to find a story and the origin of it. And I was like, fuck, how do I do that? That's going to take some work. But I actually stumbled upon one that is an interesting story, and I found the origin, and so hopefully it'll be entertaining for everyone tonight. So there you go.
All right. Good deal. Well, let's not delay, and let's get into our first story. I know when we were going through the intro, we said we'd make Kenny go first, but I lied. So we're going to let Tim go first.
Ooh, okay. Let me get my story over here so I can read it. I've also got some background noise, so I hope it does good. Some spooky background effects.
Well, it can't be any worse than someone with a microwave.
So I chose the Hook Man, the Hook. It's looks like it kind of popped up in popularity in the 50s. That's mine. That's
Tim.
spooky in the background.
Fucking Tim, man.
We had to do it.
He's showing us up, man.
So here's the Hook Man. There's many variations of this. Some of them really bad. So I went with a kind of a regular PG rated one. But so the story of the Hook Man. So the reports had been on the radio all day, though she hadn't paid much attention to them. Some crazy man had escaped from the state asylum. They were calling him the Hook Man, since he had lost his right arm, which is a big hook if you really think about it, and had it replaced with a hook. He was a killer, and everyone in the region was warned to keep watch and report anything suspicious. But this did not interest her. She was more worried about what to wear on her date. After several consultation calls with friends, she chose the blue outfit in the very latest style, and was ready and waiting on the porch when her boyfriend came to pick her up in his car. They went to a drive-in movie with another couple. Then they dropped them off and went parking in the local Lover's Lane. The blue outfit was a hit. She cuddled up close to her boyfriend, and they kissed to the sound of romantic music on the radio. Then, through this music, the announcer busted through and repeated the warning she had heard earlier that afternoon. An insane killer with a hook in the place of its right hand was loose in the area. Suddenly, the dark, moonless night didn't seem so romantic to her. The Lover's Lane was secluded and off the beating track. The perfect spot for a deranged madman to lurk, she thought, pushing her over amorous boyfriend away. Maybe we should get out of here, she said. That Hook Man does sound dangerous. He replied, oh, come on, babe. It's nothing. He moved in for another kiss. She pushed him away. No, really, we're all alone out here. I'm scared. He replied, I'm here to take care of you. Moved in for another kiss, and she pushed him away. They argued. Then, in the middle of the argument, the car shook as if something or someone had touched it. She gave a shriek and said, get us out of here now. He responded angrily, Jesus. Her boyfriend said, disgust. But he turned the key on and went roaring out of Lover's Lane with the screeching of his tires. They drove home in stony silence, and when they pulled into her driveway, he refused to get out of the car to help her. He was being so unreasonable, she fumed to herself. She opened the door, stepped out into her driveway with her chin up and her lips set. Whirling around, she slammed the door as hard as she could, and then she screamed. Her boyfriend leapt out of the car, caught her in his arms. "What is wrong? What is wrong?" he shouted. Then he saw it. A bloody hook hung from the handle of the passenger side door. Had she not stood her ground and refused his advances, they'd both be dead. And that is the story of the Hookman.
That was good. The sound effects were priceless.
So I enjoyed looking at this one. It actually, there was a lot that came up with this that I guess because it was so popular, they had a lot of interesting takes on it. And rereading it after I looked at some of them, I could absolutely see why, excuse me. So it looks like this kind of came popular in the 50s, in the early 50s. However, they believe that this really sprang to light because of a serial killer and some murders in what they call the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. This was termed by the media in the Texarkana area. What it was an unsolved serial killer that had attacked 8 people in a 10-week period of time, of which 5 were killed. This happened between February of 1946 to May of 1946. So this seemed to be a way to deter. I guess I don't know the correct words or how it would go. So I guess in a social context, but this kind of became a way for elders to turn it into a don't go out and get in a car and go necking with your boyfriend kind of situations.
Fornication.
So one of the things I guess I neglected to say was that the Phantom Killer, or the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, he only attacked people in lovers' lanes. He attacked young couples that were parking. So yeah, a lot comes with that because of the way that the story is presented most often, until you start getting into later adaptations of the story. But a lot of it, this one was a pretty old one. This came from a book, and I didn't cite the name of the book, so I apologize. But if you listen to it, the way that she is described, and at the very end, had she not stood her ground and refused his advances, they'd both be dead. So that's almost, you can almost see the story, the moral of the teaching moment of this is, I don't want to get too, I don't want to say political, but the emphasis in the 50s and 60s were always placed on the female like this. I like to look at it and say, well, if he would have taken no on the first response, then they would also be alive, but they don't emphasize on that. With that said, though, the story basically comes from kids don't have sex in cars, and listen to your parents, and abstain from rock and roll and liquor, jazz and liquor.
Don't be a hoe.
Don't be a hoe. And I think that plays out in pretty much any horror movie you watch these days. It's usually the first ones that get naked and are doing it. They're the first ones to die in pretty much every movie.
Every Friday the 13th movie, yes. Halloween movie, yes.
Pretty much any of them. Hills Have Eyes, yes. That was interesting.
It was interesting. I actually spent probably just an equal amount of time looking at the Texarkana Moonlight Murders because it was really cool. It went unsolved. However, in 2016 or 2018, I think someone wrote a book about the murders and went back through the evidence, or what was available at the time, and feels pretty certain that they have enough that today one of the people that they did interview and suspect of the murders could be successfully prosecuted.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Very cool.
Interesting. All right. Well, there's our first scary story. Moving along, Kenny, you got yours
Okay.
ready to go?
I am ready to go.
All right.
Let me get set up here. Let me set the mood. Because it's a campfire story, so we have to definitely set the mood here. Let's turn this off. Get the spooky. Make sure I can actually read this shit now. I can't, so I'm gonna do it this way because I didn't really plan this out well. All right, so I'm going to do the story of the 7 barns. Never heard. See, I have sound effects too.
You do. You have great sound effects.
So, the 7th barn, or the 7 barns story, is a tale of a haunted barn in Ohio, which was the scene of a grisly murders of an entire family and the restless spirit that still kills today.
No.
That's good. All right. So the story goes that there was a wealthy farmer who owned a lot of land in the Cayuga Valley area of Ohio. Again, I've been pre-gaming, so just in case I am slow with my words, you understand. He built a new barn on his property every time his wife had a baby. He named the barns after each of his children, and by the time the story takes place, they had 6 kids and were expecting number 7. However, the farmer's wife died in childbirth, and so did her unborn baby. The farmer went insane with grief and couldn't tend to his farm. The family had no money. They had no money to survive, and they started going under.
No.
They say it's really good, but it's distracting me.
Like old time radio stories.
No, this is great. I really needed to practice this. They say that one night, in the depths of his madness and despair, the farmer took an axe and led his children out to the barns where, one by one, he murdered every one of them.
What?
He buried each of their bodies in the 6 barns that had been named after each of them. Then the farmer went to the 7th barn, where he hung himself. As the story goes, all the barns were eventually torn down, and the land was sold off, all except for the 7th barn. Nobody wanted to buy the land because of what had happened there, and it was abandoned and soon fell into disrepair. Act 2.
What?
I had it together until Dave started laughing. Son of a bitch. They say that if you go to the barn, to that particular barn at night, you can see the ghost of the farmer hanging from the rafters, swinging ever so slowly, hearing the creaking noise as the rope presses against the wood beam. Back and forth he swings in the wind, dwelling on his terrible crime for all of eternity. No one was ever really sure where the 7th barn was located. Although it was definitely in Ohio, some said it was in the Kranz farm in the Cayuga Valley, and others said that it was in the what was called the top of the world in Northampton. In 1997, a local Ohio teacher claimed that after a lot of research, Google and YouTube, he had finally managed to track down the real location of the infamous 7th barn.
No.
Yes, we were excited. We finally found it. He said that none of the barns had ever actually been torn down. It's pronounced Cuyahoga.
Cayuga.
Shut up, John Kennedy.
Cayuga, where
I'm going to say Cayuga because I like that name. And it sounds really good. That's Mortal Kombat. Cayuga! Okay. So I lost my place, John Kennedy. He said none of them were torn down. The land had just been divided up and was sold off, and the barns had simply been incorporated into neighboring farms. According to the teacher, he was able to pinpoint the exact location because all of the barns on the neighboring properties had nameplates above their doors, the names of all the children that had been murdered. The teacher and his son set out at night, one dark and stormy night. I added that last detail. To visit this barn. They brought a video camera with them in the hopes of capturing some paranormal activity. Ooh. The next morning.
Did they get possessed?
Almost snorted. Shit.
Stop! You're distracting me, fuckers. The next morning, the teacher's wife reported her husband and son were missing. They never came home. Police found their abandoned car by the roadside. While searching the area, they entered a barn in a nearby field and found the dead bodies of the teacher and his son hanging from the same rafters as the farmer.
Wow.
Dun, dun, dun. There you go. All right, now I got to turn this shit back on.
All of Donna's sound effects were great. And then at the end, all you hear is, wow.
So this is a great story. I came upon it going after, looking at Campfire stories and looking things up. And there was a very cool Hawaiian story about night marchers. And they were allegedly like warriors from the past that would march around the Hawaiian Islands and stuff. And I really wanted to do that story, but there were so many words I could not pronounce at all. And I was not going to do it Tim Vickers. So I went with this one. So what I found was that there is a story. So it seems that this legend actually morphed from a real event. And it really did happen in Ohio, and it happened in the Cayuga Valley of Ohio. Wow, I am really bright. Look at that. Okay. No, I think I'm just going to turn that one off so I don't look so overexposed. Okay, so basically, there was an event that happened in 1936 in this same area. It just happened about 4 miles away from where they say the story took place. And there is a newspaper clipping that I did find.
Oh, cool.
That says the whole family killed by rifle fire.
Uh-oh.
And it's in Akron, Ohio. And it says relatives went to a suburban Cayuga. I'm still gonna say it that way, John. Falls last night to visit a family of William Harrison Slabo, and found all 4 members slain by rifle fire. County Prosecutor H.E. Warner said today that Slabo shot his wife and 2 children and then shot himself. They added that Slabo was temporarily insane. And apparently somebody came to visit. The neighbors saw this person and they were all concerned. So the neighbors had a key. They were able to get in and they discovered this family was all killed, murdered. And they blamed it on temporary insanity of the father. So over the years, and this was documented in 1936, that was the date that I got the newspaper from. And over the years, this story has morphed into this 7th barn story. And I found the picture. This is the actual house where the murders took place. So I did find the original homestead. and I couldn't print out the Google map of this because it was just too. You had to go out too wide to see everything, and you wouldn't be able to tell what building was what anyway. But I was able to, when you go down onto the roadway and you can like zoom through the roads, I was able to actually find all 7 barns that were associated with the story. So although they weren't associated with children, that's part of the story that was morphed to make it seem creepier. But there were 7 barns. They are still in existence. They are still in that little localized area around that house. And it is based on a true story, which, I mean, we can go back on to earlier episodes where we've talked about based on a true story. So there was this true story that happened, and then it just went. I pre-gamed, so I am going to pick a story. Where is it? Shut up, Bob. So this was an interesting exercise because it was like, this is a really cool story, and telling it, even the dramatic way that I did, minus the laughing, it was really cool, and this would be really fun when you're out camping. But going into the real story and finding out that it's based on a real murder that is creepy enough in itself, but finding that it was based on actual events was I did not expect that. I was expecting like just legend born just of imagination, but I was pleasantly, well, I don't know if pleasantly surprised is the right way to say it, because it was in fact a triple murder and a suicide. So I don't know if there's anything pleasant about that. So there you go. Yeah.
So those two actually had something behind them.
Yes.
Interesting.
I like that story. When I saw,
that was cool.
Yeah, when I saw that you picked that, when I looked it up, I liked that.
Cool.
I'd never heard that story. It was a good story. I enjoyed that.
Did you like my dramatic telling of it too? Because I enjoyed that.
You and Don are just like perfect together. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. I think I put most of the comments up. That's a good point. Tiffany, I love when you find sources for based on a true story and the legend is actually close to the truth.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I agree.
Let's see what else we got here. Melissa, I'm surprised some religious nut hasn't figured out a way to turn each barn into a version of the 7 deadly sins or some shit.
That's actually cool as hell right there.
Yeah.
That is badass. I like that idea.
That sounds like a good movie idea.
Yeah.
I did look, like, as I went through Google Earth, I was trying to zoom in as far as possible to see if there was any kind of nameplate or something on the barns, but I couldn't see anything. So I think that's just a fabrication of the story that evolved over time.
Okay. Well, you have to take a trip to Ohio then and try to track that down.
Okay.
John Kennedy show.
I'm good. Yeah, John Kennedy, that's up to you because you were dicking with me all through my story. Cayuga.
I think somebody, who said it on the Cayuga up here, something about sounding like an old, there you go. It sounds like a horn from an old car. Cayuga. Oh, that was good. So.
You're lucky I didn't pick the Hawaiian story because
God,
there was like 15 words. I was like, there's no way.
No
way I'm doing
talking
this.
about mountain. Come on, I wanna Leia. And
Oh my God.
can you imagine the pronunciation of those Hawaiian names?
Oh, the entirety of what you said finally sunk in.
Oh boy. Yeah, I still think we need to do a show where we just pick incredibly tough names to pronounce. And people just post them in the comments in the chat room here and we try to pronounce them. That'd be good.
Yeah.
All right. So the one I picked is Resurrection Mary. That's a Chicago version of a Phantom Hitchhiker story. And I'll talk a little bit more on the different variants of the Phantom Hitchhiker. This is one of them. There's actually 4. And there was, I know this is shocking again, there was two studies or two papers that they studied to try to figure out what the origin of the original story was. So it was pretty interesting. And then there's this whole variant and subvariant categorization of these Phantom Hitchhiker stories, and nobody really is sure of some of the origins. They tend to pull from a whole bunch of different stories. So I'm going to tell the story of Resurrection Mary, Archer Avenue, Justice, Illinois. So not too far from here. And Jen and I have been down to the cemetery that we'll talk about here. We've driven by the old ballroom that they talk about, and I am going to read the story that ended up on chicagoreader.com by Edward McClelland, June 26, 2018. And he supposedly talked to somebody who had been telling this story for a very long time. So here we go. Inside the ballroom, Vince spent the first half hour downing enough Cuba Libras and smoking enough Lucky Strikes to work up the courage to ask a girl for a dance. You can already tell what era this is probably in, especially as I get a little more into it. By the time the band got started on Jumpin' at the Woodside, he was in a bold state of mind, much like Mr. Biddle pre-gaming tonight. Spotting a pretty blonde girl in a white dress, he said as casually as he could manage, "Hey, it ain't right to stand for Count Basie. Why don't we cut a rug on this one?" The girl smiled, and they joined the jitterbugging throng on the parquet floor. The band played a few more fast numbers, Boogie Woogie and Jeepers Creepers. So Vince didn't get a chance to talk to his partner. That he didn't mind too much. Sometimes girls asked what he did for a living, and he was a bookkeeper at the Union Stockyards. Even though he didn't work anywhere near the slaughterhouse, that gave some girls the willies. When the band transitioned to begin, Vince was finally able to get close to his partner. Her name was Mary, and she lived, she said, on Damon Avenue in Brighton Park neighborhood. That wasn't far from where Vince lived, in the house he shared with his parents. As they slow danced, he noticed for the first time that the girl's hands were cold and her skin brittle. Mary seemed to notice it too. So he made what he hoped was a lighthearted remark. "Cold hands mean you have a warm heart." Boy, what a player. Mary smiled, and they danced together for the rest of the evening. After the final number, Vince offered Mary a ride home. Her place was just a straight shot up Archer. But after they had driven north for a few miles, Mary insisted to pull the car over outside the locked gates of Resurrection Cemetery, the graveyard of Chicago's Polish community. Vince was baffled, but he complied. Mary opened the door and stepped out onto the roadside. "I have to go, and you can't follow me," she said. Then she walked toward the gates, laid a hand on the iron chain that bound the gates together, and vanished. Vince spent the rest of the night driving his Chevy up and down Archer Avenue, looking for the blonde girl in a white dress. He drove until dawn, and then, when the cemetery gates opened, he drove through the rows of tombstones engraved with crosses and angels and names of the various people buried within the cemetery. He was impelled not simply by the mystery of having seen a ghost, maybe, but by the hope that the girl he had danced with was not a ghost, that he could dance with her again on some future night. Catching no sight of Mary, he finally decided to drive to the address she had given him before she got out of the car. It was a brick bungalow on a street of nearly identical houses separated by concrete gangways a few feet wide. Only the adornments on the porches and in the yards, an American flag, a statue of the Virgin, and a half bathtub differentiated the dwellings. Vince rang the doorbell. His eyes were red with sleepiness. His dark beard had not been shaven for a day, and his hair had fallen loose over his forehead. The middle-aged woman who answered the door looked startled by the young caller's dishevelment. She looked even more startled when Vince asked, "Is Mary home?" "Mary doesn't live here anymore," said the woman, who looked old enough and enough like Mary to be her mother. "Mary died in a car accident 4 years ago." "Who are you?" "I knew Mary in high school." Vince lied. It was the only plausible story for why he had been unaware of her death. "And you didn't know?" I went to college downstate after I graduated, he said, and that much was true. And he attended Illinois State University in Normal. I just moved back to Chicago. Looking past the woman who was still blocking the doorway, Vince spied a framed photo resting atop a piano in the front room. It was the girl he had danced with the night before. An ever youthful face, never to age, the face of a ghost. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, the woman said. Mary went out dancing with some boys she worked with at Brock's, but they never made it to the dance hall. One of the boys crashed the car into the L at Wacker and Lake. Mary was thrown through the windshield and died on the way to the hospital. I'm sorry to hear that, Vince said, retreating down the strips. I'm sorry for your loss. If you want to visit Mary's grave, the woman added, she's buried in Resurrection Cemetery, where he dropped her off. So that is the story of Resurrection Mary. There's been a lot of different variations of it. People have seen her. They've picked her up. She simply disappeared out of the back of the vehicle. But let me see if we have any comments here quick before I get into the kind of the background and the history of this. That would be okay. Let's see. Is not Bob. Oh, yep. We all love old cemeteries. Are you sure? Are you sure it's not Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio?
Yes, I can answer that. Yes, that's right. It was Cuyahoga, whatever Falls, Ohio. That's where it took place.
Yes, John. Mary was quite contrary. She was dead. Resurrection Cemetery. Do you want zombie? This is how we get zombies. Yes. Okay. So I think. Oh wait. Fun fact. For people who want to visit this place, weed is completely legal in Illinois. Well, that might be why there's a resurgence of people reporting seeing Resurrection Mary. But who knows? Okay, so the story goes that in 1934, a girl was killed in an auto accident on the way home from O'Henry, which was later renamed to Willowbrook Ballroom on Archer Avenue in Justice, Illinois. In 1939, a cab driver said that he picked her up and basically disappeared out of the back of the cab again. And then in 1977, and I'll see if I can share my screen here, the bars that are the metal bars that are at the entrance of the cemetery, somebody reported seeing her standing there grabbing those bars. And when they later looked, they were bent, and there's handprints that seem to be burned or etched into the actual metal bars. For a while, it became such a spectacle that people had to actually the church removed those bars. So let me see if I can find the right one. Here we go. See if you can see that. Can you see those?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they're saying here that that's her handprints burned or etched into the bars and they're bent. So the church took them down for a while because they became such a spectacle. Then they put them back up and they supposedly repainted it, tried to smooth them out. However, they supposedly reappeared. The burnt mark and the handprints reappeared. But when you read more into it, they're saying that what happened is a truck hit those bars and there was a small fire, and that's what caused the bending and the heat, and what looks like somebody may have grabbed them and pulled them a little bit. So there's a couple different ideas of who Mary is. Mary Bregovi, 1934. She died in a auto accident in the city of Chicago. So they're not quite sure if that would be maybe the origin of Mary, or Ursula Bielski thinks that maybe Anna Norkus may be who they're referring to. She was on her way home from the ballroom and died in an auto accident in 1927. So people, I think what you're going to see as we talk a little bit more about this is, yeah, there may have been something that happened, but they're trying to almost take from or fit in with some of the other Phantom Hitchhiker stories, because one of the things that the two authors that I'm going to briefly talk about did is they got stories from all over the U.S. And this was in the 30s and 40s, and this was published. They had two articles, one in 1942, one in 1943 in California Folklore Quarterly. where they got 79 of these different Phantom Hitchhiker stories, and they wanted to figure out where they're coming from. What's the origin? What's the original one? So they published 2 articles on it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. There were 79 stories they collected, and they found out that there's really 4 variants. The first one is you just come across this Phantom Hitchhiker, and they give you an address to take them to and drop them off, and that's it. And then there's the second one where it involves an old woman who typically shares some sort of prophecy with the occupants of the vehicle. And then C is actually the story I just told, the place of entertainment. You meet somebody, they leave together, and then it unfolds the way that I talked about or relayed in the story. And then the fourth variant, D, they identify the person, the Phantom Hitchhiker who gets in the vehicle, as a local deity. So I thought that was interesting. So they think what happened is the one where it's just the typical, you get an address and drop them off. They think that is the original story. However, they have yet to discover what the actual source of these stories are, which is kind of interesting. And Tim and Kenny, they actually found a source of yours. With these, there doesn't seem to be one single source. And then with the old lady and the prophecy in the place of entertainment, the Resurrection Mary type story, the address and the old lady prophecy, they think those played in and stole parts, or the Resurrection Mary took parts of that. They think the Resurrection Mary story may have formed independently of these other ones, of the different variants, and then it would draw different parts from those stories. So what led them to kind of conclude this? Well, in the pre-motor era, there were some stories, but not a whole lot like this. So they think it's pretty modern. 76 out of the 79 stories they collected had cars, automobiles involved with them. They haven't found the historic antecedent yet. The general elements, they are common to European and Greek Roman tales, but the ghosts were always recognized back then. So they say, we don't really think that's where it came from, because these are people they don't recognize. They don't really find out who they are until later. And the fact that the ghost is supposedly so human, you're touching her, you're dancing. There's other variations and stories of the ghost being able to eat and drink in front of people. And that was not common really until the end of the 19th century. So they don't think that this story would have had an origin way back there. So what are they found out the original components, at least of the story. They think it follows a pattern. There's an introductory remark. And one of the things is, I can't believe this, but my buddy had this experience. So they're kind of building it up like it's believable. Then they give you a specific place, a specific time, a specific date to make you think it's more believable. Then you describe the driver in the vehicle, then the character of the hitchhiker, and then the circumstances of where they picked up the Phantom Hitchhiker. Then they explain the disappearance, which usually happens when you don't know. It's kind of one of those, Resurrection Mary is a little different, but the other Phantom Hitchhikers, it's like they were in the back seat, and then they kind of looked away, looked in the rearview mirror, and they're gone. They finish it up with concluding remarks. So the original elements that they found through analysis are, they think the automobile is original to whatever the first story was, that there's a young, attractive girl involved, that it's a street or highway scene of the origin of the pickup. The back seat, they typically sit in the back seat and give an address of where they want to go. And then the disappearance. And that has to do with returning from the dead somehow, a cemetery, or they find another way to kind of go through the story and prove that they were dead. So A, the story with the address, that seems to be the major one. And then B and C elements seem to divert from that. And then, talking a little bit into the history, where do they think this could have come from? Well, you dig into this a little bit more, and there's an English ballad. It's about a girl given a lift on horseback by her recently deceased lover, called the Suffolk Wonder, and that was in 1723 to 1725. So that seems like it has some components of the Phantom Hitchhiker story as well. Also in 1602, 1608, the interpretation of this on the signs and wonders preceding the liturgic broil by John Petrie Clint. So it was a vicar and two farmers. They were out in Sweden and they were driving back. And they had they saw it looked like, I don't know what, a serving girl, just a normal servant girl walking along the road. She got in the car and then they stopped for a drink and they got her a beer. The beer actually, when they looked back, was just filled with malt. And then the beer transformed into acorns. And then she gave them a prophecy that said, you're going to have good crops, but there's also going to be war and plague. So that feeds into one of the other variants that I discussed before. And then in the Bible, Acts 8:26 through 40, the Apostle Philip boards a chariot of an Ethiopian, converts him to Christianity, and then disappears. So it goes all the way back. Some of the Phantom Hitchhiker can go all the way back into some of the Bible stories. So pretty interesting. A lot of different variants. However, they can't really figure out exactly where it came from, but they think it's pretty modern. They think it's a pretty modern, so 30s, 40s, stealing and borrowing components from classic ghost literature.
I think you're right. I think this is one of those classic stories that were one of the originals, one of the OG ghost stories, and it was just because it was one of the early ones, and probably came about in the early automotive history, where like automobiles were becoming more common and people were traveling. So you had this story that probably started in that area, the Chicago area, but then branched out as people traveled more. They told the story and other people adopted it, and then it evolved depending on where you were, and it took on elements of other stories depending on who told it, and then your location, your address where she gave it, or the cemetery where she gets out and goes into and stuff changed depending on location, because it became a local legend.
Yep.
And it just sounds like, yeah, it depends on who told it, and it's one of these things that just grew out of control, and everyone has sort of a resurrection Mary. It's almost like the Lady in White kind of story, where everyone has one and it just has different elements. But
right.
Good story.
The hitchhiker, that's so ingrained in our culture. I put Mad Marge up there because even Pee Wee Herman, it's rare that you can not find some type of aspect or something with the some type of ghost hitchhiker that you pick up. I would even say more so than the Hook. I mean, you see the Hook brought up in different stories. Usually if it's a scene where they're camping, even if it's not a scary movie, they use the Hook for some reason. But yeah, that's I think that story, I don't know if Resurrection Mary's the specific one, but I think that element shows up in a lot.
Yeah, it's not just the one. If you look at one of the articles, and they give you different examples of variants, and there was at least 4 or 5 examples of that variant just in other cities in Illinois. And then when you expand it to across the country, they were getting similar stories across the country, which is interesting because back then you didn't have the internet. You didn't have people posting crap on social media all the time, and things would spread really fast. But those stories, I mean, it didn't take them long to get 79 stories from across the U.S. that all had similarities. There are variants they determined, but they all were very similar and seemed to have somewhat of a modern origin, of course, sprinkling in some of the historic ideas of ghosts along the side of the road and in bad weather or unusual circumstances.
Awesome.
All right, so let's see what other comments we might have here. Let's see. Whisper down the lane. This is one reason why oral histories cannot be trusted. Yep,
Yeah.
for sure. Let's see what else we got. That's a little disturbing. Nobody else has had a drink yet. I've been drinking.
I have
Kid-
soda, but I've been so after the memorial service that I was at, we went to the bar, which is just across the parking lot out of this hotel, and I've had considerable amounts of alcohol. So I
There
was
it is.
pre-gaming pretty hard. I even sent them a picture. I'm like, yeah, I'm pre-gaming. Big tall glass of Guinness. So I'm feeling pretty good, and there's a bottle of whiskey that's out by the fire that I'm going to start getting into as soon as we're done here.
I'll put a
Yeah.
bottle next to that fire next time
Oh, that's nice.
with
Very
some
nice.
s'mores always.
Right.
There was a comment. Melissa was asking where the place was in Ohio that I talked about. It is called the Hammond Kranz Homestead. It's on Ira Road. That's
What was the-
IRA.
What homestead?
Fuck you.
Hey Tim, what's the name of that pandemic again?
Yeah.
the blue boob. The blue boob.
Oh, hey, careful, Bram
Shit.
Stoker will get in on that.
So it is in Cayuga. That's how I'm saying it. So let me see if I can put it up here so you guys can see it.
No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Never mind. I'll send you a message, Melissa, and I'll give you the exact address.
It's
I
one of
agree.
EWE.
One of the 7 barns, the fuck you barn.
I'm sorry. Fuck you is one word.
All right. Well, I think that's it for the stories. Unless anybody, Tim, Kenny, anything else to add or share?
Well, I like stories. I think I think they're in a good part of every society. It's a lot of fun. I think the campfire, just the whole idea, is
Yeah.
a lot of fun. The stories there, and I didn't even think about looking at the origin of campfire stories in total. And I thought that was really cool. Kenny came up with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's really good.
Yeah, there's nothing better in setting the mood for Halloween than big bonfire and people telling scary stories. Some of them are stupid and some of them are just things people made up but get repeated all the time. But some of them actually could weird you out. And I think at least with Tim and Kenny's stories, when you find out that there might be a little bit of truth behind those, it actually makes it scarier, I think.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
It was really interesting. I mean, I've never looked them up before, and I was surprised at how many are out there.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, ghost stories for campfires, and then breaking it down into, kid-friendly ones, and then the gory ones for adults, which I really liked. And there were so many interesting ones, and it really went down. It was one of Tim's rabbit holes because I found myself like 2 hours in reading these stories. Like, this is a great story, but nope. 20 words
Yeah.
I can't pronounce. Not doing that one.
Nope.
Next story.
Resulted in me buying yet another book, The Vanishing Hitchhiker.
Nice.
American
So-
urban legends and their meanings. It's pretty cool stuff in there.
That's cool. But I love the idea of I love the ghost story, the classic ghost story, and I think I've said this before. Even when I go to a tourist town, I take a local ghost story if there is one. I just like the ghost stories and the history that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
But the added bonus is I can't help but look into the history of it. Like, where did it come from? And I liked that. I really like finding the origin of it. And in the case of the story that I shared tonight, finding out that there was a real murder-suicide associated with it. I was like, wow, this is interesting. And it got me, like, that was another hour and a half down the rabbit hole because I had to find the barns. And I did. I found and I traveled down Google Earth for like 20 minutes trying to find these fucking barns. and I found them, and it was really cool. It's seeing them like, all right, there he goes, 1, 2, 7. I got 7. All right, that's awesome.
That's cool.
Pretty cool story. So, and sharing it, being able to share it with everyone, and hopefully it was entertaining to everyone that's watching.
It was fun for me. I mean, I love the Resurrection Cemetery story, Resurrection Mary. That's a classic in the Chicago area, and you hear it in a lot of other places. The White Lady and the Cemetery, they're all very similar stories, but it's always one that's fascinated me, and people still tell it to this day. So it's good stuff. All right, before closing comments, let's talk a little bit about what we're doing next weekend, which is the Halloween show. So I think we have agreed that the three of us are dressing up, and we are encouraging our listeners to dress up as well. And it's kind of an open mic night, I believe. That's one of the things we're going to do is open mic. And the only way you're going to get on the air is if you have a costume on, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the rule. You have to have a costume on, but you can come on the air then, and I guess we'll just kind of have open mic, topic, question, whatever you want to come on and talk about. We'll go ahead and do that. And I believe we need to reach out to Aaron. Isn't he going to be down in Mexico City?
Oh, yeah.
And he was going to be our on the scene Day of the Dead reporter, I believe.
Right.
That should be cool. I look forward to that if he can do it. And the other thing we're going to do is we have been looking for and collecting pictures of Tim, Kenny, and myself dressed up for Halloween as kids. And I've seen some of Tim's. I've shared a couple of mine already, and all I can say is we're going to laugh our freaking asses off because some of those costumes are just priceless. And then what else? Do we have anything else planned? Because I thought were we going to do trivia or no? We could.
We could
do some sort of Three Tortured Souls Halloween paranormal trivia. Maybe if we just think of a question, we can just shoot it out there and see if people can get it right. Maybe we'll test people on our origin story.
Oh, that's good.
That might be kind of fun. But anything will go. So it's going to be an open fun mic. It's going to be fun. I think we're going to have a good time. Looking forward to it. With that, I don't have anything else. Just looking forward to Halloween and next weekend, and don't have anything else going on besides that. So I will toss it over to Tim. What do you got? Closing comments and things coming up.
I kind of hit on my closing comments with that earlier. I really do appreciate. I think stories tell a lot about culture, and different stories tell different aspects of the culture and the society and where you're the local culture that you're at. And I think it's really cool. I do like stories a lot for that reason. It's really good. I enjoyed those, and a lot like Kenny. As soon as half of my time was also spent on the murders, and then I ended up in different serial killer history, and it was rabbit hole. I went through a lot of death in that one, just for that story. But it was good. I enjoyed it. I think the only thing I have coming up is a show I do every Saturday night with two friends, and I'll be dressing up next week. So we'll see.
Nice.
Looking forward to that. All right, Kenny. What you got?
So, final thoughts. I mean, I like Tim. I pretty much touched on them with the last thing I said, but I mean, basically, enjoy ghost stories. They're fun. They're entertaining, and even though we usually take a closer look at things and really get into the details and history, and we deconstruct claims and stories, it's still fun to enjoy the story. Halloween is a weird holiday because we've talked about the evolution of the holiday itself, where it came from, and enjoy it. It's a time to get up and get out of character, get into another character and play the part, and no one will make fun of you because of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one day of year people don't make fun of me for that. Every other day of the year they do. But I deal with that. But enjoy it. But also know that most of these stories do have something behind them. They have some kind of origin. They have somewhere it came from. And that can be just as interesting as the story itself. When you start getting into it and finding out, like, oh my God, this really is based on a real story. And this real story is pretty tragic or fucked up or whatever. It's still cool to get into that and then find the places where it happened. Really, really interesting. And you can have fun with it. So with that, that's my final thoughts. For things coming up, I have a few things because I always have a few things because I never stop doing shit. But tomorrow night, Sunday night at midnight, if you're up, I'm doing a podcast called Spaced Out Radio. It's an actual radio program, which is weird. I usually do podcasts on the internet where I can curse, but apparently this is like, FCC.
They're going to need a long.
They have somebody on the
commute.
dump button.
I gotta stay sober for it, so I'm doing that tomorrow night, midnight.
That sound like
Eastern time.
R2D2 being interviewed.
They're going to be like, Kenny cost us $5,000 in fines. Fuck that. We're not having him again.
So I got that going on again, midnight Eastern time. It's 9 p.m. Pacific. If you're interested, let's see. I'm doing a podcast, another podcast, November 6th, which I don't know the name of it, so they'll probably be mad at me. I'm doing another podcast called Crossroads on November 4th. Doing a lot of podcasts. But there's other things in the works. I have a lot of stuff going on. I did the second class for my course with Lloyd Auerbach, which is going really well. I'm really excited and happy about it so far. It's been really good. And we're up to, I think we have like 15 to 20 students. Really, really doing good. But other than that, I also do this show Friday nights called The Skeptical Help Bar, where I change it up a bit and I drink during the show.
How original.
I know. Who would have thunk it? But I do that at 9 p.m. Eastern if you're interested. And then I do this awesome show on Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And it's great. There's two other guys that do it with me, and we science the shit out of things. So it's fun. It's fun. That's all I got.
All right, cool. Well, with that, we'll close it out. Thanks everybody for listening. Next weekend, looking forward to it. Bring your costumes, bring your questions, bring your topics, bring a big drink, because I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of fun and there's going to be a lot of alcohol involved. So until then, everybody have a good weekend. Stay safe. Take care. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.